Yes, I can. Ah?
Okay, awesome.
All right.
Awesome. I might leave. I've already made you host. I might leave now.
Okay.
All right, sir.
I'm going to stop the sharing of my screen now so that you can proceed with your own session.
Thank you, Stephen. I'm not sure if you can hear my voice. You seem to be in control of the mic, but can you hear me?
I can hear you clearly, perfectly clearly.
All right. All right. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak on this subject. And I mean, it's nice to meet everyone on this call and to have the opportunity to be sharing with you in this unprecedented time that we all seem to be going through. I have a couple of slides. I will just share my slides focused on the subject Dr. Stephen has put together, primarily on trust and commitment. And how do you build it for the purpose of supporting your business growth? I'd like if we can interact. So there are a couple of questions on my slide. Please, when we get to the questions, I will speak to it. You can share your answers on the chat group, and I'll attempt to use that to shape the conversation. My objective really is to use this question to understand some of your own thinking about where you are, just so my conversation also can be aligned to what you like to learn. Let me start by also acknowledging the work that is being done by Edustart and just the desire to bring knowledge in contact with people. I think it's really laudable. And I mean, the rewards of the teacher, they say it's in heaven, but I hope you come across yours on this set. Thank you very much, Doctor, for inviting me and for putting this together.
Thank you, sir.
I think it's quite a very broad subject, but I will attempt to use today to streamline it to the idea of business, and business from the context of who am I working with, who are my customers, who are my partners, and who are my shareholders. And I will attempt to speak generically to the idea of building trust within these various groups or sets of people. Can you see my slide? Just so I can you see my slide?
Yes, I can see your slides. Everyone can see your slides as well.
All right, thanks. Okay, my name is Yomi Adedeji. Started Softcom while I was in Covenant, and I think over the last couple of years, grown ourselves into a group of about 264 people. We're primarily focused on solving 4 key problems that we think can enable people and businesses grow in Africa. Our work effort currently is still very focused on Nigeria. However, we're approaching our growth from a platform point of view. And our hope in the future is once we're done, these same platforms, without any form of adjustments, will serve also other countries who have similar problems, and also the world at large. Currently, these 4 problems we believe are the heart of how people think about growth in their lives. I wouldn't take too much time to talk about Softcom. I think we can learn more about Softcom ourselves. And I'll just kind of like bring the conversation on today's subject, which is really about trust and commitment. Trust in itself is defined as a firm belief in something or someone. I did emphasize something or someone, and you will see the reason why as we go along our slides. But if you want to generate trust from people, if you want to gain trust from people, if you want to establish trust with people, that is the someone. If you also want to establish trust in a product, or trust in a place, or trust in an activity or a cause, that is something. If we bring this in relation to commitment itself, which I mean is literally defined as the state or quality of being dedicated to a cause or activity or something. I also attempted to put in brackets something and someone again. So both trust and commitment is always spoken about in relation to someone or in relation to something. And this something, in the case of our conversation today, is your business. But I think an important lesson to learn first is neither trust or commitment can be bought. I think I should start with that. And also, neither trust and commitment can be earned completely on day one. Trust and commitment in itself is a journey. And sometimes as entrepreneurs, we may even get frustrated in the process of, for example, getting our people that we work with to trust us on the journey that we're on or the goals we have for our company. Getting our people within our company to commit to the tasks that they have to do, to commit to the objectives the business have, just so we can achieve this goal. But it's really, really important to understand that this idea of trust and commitment isn't just a thing in itself, is a journey and something that we continuously nurture. And I think the next few slides will speak a little bit to that. So I wanted to just kind of like take a baseline understanding of how important is this to our business. We've had a lot of debate around the importance of trust, which often sometimes could connote loyalty, or the importance of even deep line commitment to a business. And where do you draw the line between your commitment and your trust of yourself to giving it to someone or to something? And the pyramid on the table kind of like paints up a picture of what a business that has trust and commitment looks like, and what a business that doesn't have trust and commitment also looks like. If you look at the dysfunctional team, absence of trust oftentimes leads to fear of conflict. When you don't trust someone, it's difficult to bring up specific or sensitive issues. And this now means you start to generate your own emotions inside of you. And oftentimes could even be untrue. But when trust is absent, oftentimes people within the confines of a place or the confines of a cause fear conflict. And an absence of conflict means that commitment will be lacking. Because in the process of attempting to be committed to something, you will ask questions. You will have to come from inside. And once you're unable to clarify the questions that you have inside of you, commitment is often lacking. Then it often will lead to an avoidance of accountability. And at the end of that pyramid, almost inattention to results. And this could be in the case of a person who works in a business. It could be in the case of even a customer. It could also be in the case of a shareholder or a partner that you have that you're doing business with. If you look on the other left side of when trust and commitment exist within a business, conflict is welcome because it means that we've created the room for integrating our differences. I think one important thing trust helps us do within our business is to allow for us to integrate differences. I can emphasize the importance of this primarily because you'll have people coming from various educational backgrounds, various experiences, various beliefs about life, oftentimes coming together for something or for someone. And by design, you will find differences and conflict will happen. And conflict is healthy, conflict is good. But when there's trust, it helps with integrating all of these differences together. And at the place of commitment, you don't see differences. So by integrating our differences, we're able to reach commitment. By getting to commitment, we have more accountability. People own up to things, people deliver on things, and it eventually leads to the results that I believe we all want for our various businesses. I think it's really important to think this through and to conduct our business and conduct ourselves, bearing in mind trust and commitment in itself is a catalyst for business growth. Oftentimes, a business is set up to do something or to offer a value or to offer a service. And trust and commitment in itself, internally within the people that work in the business, externally with the customers the business has, externally with the partners and stakeholders the business is working with, and at the shareholder level, at the ownership level, when there's the presence of trust and commitment, it's a catalyst for propelling business growth. So I'll share with us today 7 steps that I think everyone can utilize to build trust and commitment within their businesses. It would take a couple of minutes. I think within 20 minutes or so, I'll be done. So I'll kind of like leave room for us to ask questions, or in case there are questions as well, we want to ask as I go along the slide. Please put them in the chat box and I'll attempt to speak to it as I go along. But before we see what these 7 steps are, I have a question for us. And the question really is, I don't know if everyone can take a look at this picture. There's a picture on the screen. Do you mind if you just type in the in the chat box rather? What do you see in this picture? Please, you can take a screenshot. Yes, you can. I'll also kind of like make the slides available right after the call, actually, in case you want to take a look at it again. But what do you see in this picture? Someone just did say young woman. Can we just kind of like just all share young woman? I'm just gonna wait a few more. All right. From a side, a young woman, from another, an old woman. A young woman like a princess, a beautiful woman, an old woman. Someone did say, I've seen this before. Young lady in blackwood material, an old woman, a young woman, a lady. I think the point I'm trying to make really is that you can see different things, even though you're looking at the same thing. And the foundation of trust in itself is to establish the baseline of what are we looking at. Because once we start looking at the same picture and we see different things, it's difficult for us to connect as to where exactly are we trying to go to. If you look closely at the picture, you can see a young woman actually looking towards the back that has a black hole on her neck. If you take a step back and you look at the young woman's chin, it also could fit into becoming a nose of an old woman, and the mouth of the old woman just really at the bottom, looking straight. And the hair of the young woman, lady, could also look like the eyes of an old woman. And just looking at this picture, really, it helps us view that in life, we can be looking at the same thing and have different perspectives. But to build trust and commitment, it requires clarity. And before we can demand for trust and commitment, our customers, from our partners, from our shareholders, and in this case, maybe even co-founders, it's really, really important we're clear to ourselves on what do we want trust and commitment on. And to remove the ambiguity to do. So I would say the journey itself of attempting to build trust within business begins with self. And it begins with being clear to self, what exact picture do I see? Am I trying to build a company to ensure that people can have access to raw materials they need to make books? Am I trying to ensure no woman that gives birth to a child has any need for antenatal drugs? So I would ensure that I get drugs to them. Am I trying to ensure that people who for any reason are unable to progress in life could come to me and I'll give them answers for progress? I've used these generic examples just to help us come to terms with it's really, really important first that we're clear on someone and we're clear on something that we want to build trust and commitment for. It could also be a set of things. It could also be a couple of people. But it's very, very important that in attempting to demand for trust from our peers and from the people we work with, or in attempting to earn trust rather, or in attempting to establish it within our businesses, we have clarity on what exactly are we trying to do. Because it's this clarity that will help us with what I'll call the first step of building trust, which is really about beginning with why. Oftentimes, people want to speak a lot to what they have achieved, where they want to go. But when it involves bringing in others, it's really, really important we give them a very valid reason that they can connect to. Why helps them understand the underlying meaning of what they're about to do. So if you want them to trust in something, or you want them to trust in someone, or even in a set of things, or in a couple of people, it's really, really important that we begin first with why. We want to be able to ensure people can eat once a day. Why? primarily because we've done a research, or we've gone to do a bunch of activities, or we've had experiences, or we have a passion to ensure no one in itself goes to bed home hungry or goes to bed at night hungry. The emphasis on why in itself is often really, I would say, the beginning of the pyramid of trust, to kind of like establish the right set of meaning for the ones who you want to earn trust from. I think also why stimulates the right emotion. When you speak about what you want to do, people think about your brilliance. They think about, oh, this is really good. This is really awesome. This is going to solve this problem. But once you start to speak about your why, it stimulates their emotion. It's no more just your brilliance that they're saying. It's your intent. And it helps you clearly communicate what exact value you want to bring to life within your business. I think every business leader and every entrepreneur should have a clear strategy on how they intend to communicate why to their people, why to their customers, and why to their stakeholders, and also why to their partners. I also believe being able to communicate why also invites conversation, invites opinions, invites perspectives, and all of it kind of like will enrich our thought process in a bit to build a very trustworthy and committed business. The second step to this really is align on what. So after you begin with why and you're clear on why you want something to happen, why you want to build a company, or why you want to make a product, based on the audience that your why is targeted towards. I think one really important step is to now align on what. I've used the word align in replacement for the word agree for a particular reason. Alignment signifies an understanding of what needs to be done and where it is to lead to. The idea of agreement oftentimes says we have spoken to each other and these are the rules of our engagement. But in a bid to stimulate the right type of integrating differences, it's really, really important that in communicating what we have to do as a company, what we have to do as a department, or what someone himself within our business has to do, we take an alignment view to this. It helps us with what are we trying to do. It helps the person also, what do I need to do? It helps them with clarity around, oh, in this all that we have to do, what is my own part? Alignment helps you also define boundaries and intersections. And I think one of the things that break trust and cause trust issues within organizations is in the absence of boundaries and intersections. Boundaries really is, where does my work stop? Intersections is, where does my work connect with another person? And I think as a leader, it's really, really important that as we communicate to people and as we attempt to establish an organization of trust, and through all of our structures of communication, we encourage ourselves and we encourage the people who work with us to oftentimes define boundaries and intersections for people that work with them. Because what that means is it helps accountable. So if I say, for example, you're responsible for getting this particular bit done, right? So you're accountable for this stage of it. However, this is how it connects to the next stage. So when you don't get this done at this time, it makes it impossible for this person at this intersection to yield results. And I think it helps in kind of like broadening the conversations we have in a bit to establish an organization that is filled with trust. The last point I will make on alignments really is alignment stimulates togetherness and collaboration. And if you look at the picture on the slide, really it's primarily just a direction. So alignment means all of us are at the beginning of the line and there's just only one place we're headed to. So it's not enough for me to succeed as a person, right? It's important that as I succeed, the next person also succeeds, which is the next person that is working next to me or everybody at my intersection, just in a bit to get us to this finish line. And this is same as well when we're dealing with customers. For customers, just clearly ensuring that we're together on an objective. And it's not a case of, I am trying to sell you a product. You are trying to solve a different problem. It's important that we align it together. The product we're trying to sell must always be viewed by the customer as well as trying to solve the problem they want to solve with it. And how do we bring these two together is really what alignment helps us do. And from the beginning of our journey, whether it's in establishing trust with our people, whether it's in establishing trust with customers, we start to stimulate togetherness and collaboration, which oftentimes leads to the results that we want. I have seen some questions. Dr. Steve, should I stop and answer these questions first?
Please feel free. Please feel free. Feel free. If you want to answer them now or at the end, anyone that is convenient for you. If it allows you for your flow of thought.
Okay. Maybe I should run through the slides. Then I think I can come back to the questions, because I think some of the questions might be answered in subsequent slides.
Oh, perfect.
All right. Thank you. All right. All right. So number 3, really, as a third step, is agree on the rules. I've used the word align in the second stage because it's very important that when you're trying to get something done with a bunch of people, whether they are people who work with you, or they are people you're trying to deliver value for as your customers, or they're just even your partners, whether they're financial partners or just even equity partners. In whatever case you find yourself, you have to agree on the rules. But it's very important to not mix stage 2 with stage 3. Because in stage 2, you want a very healthy conversation. You want an understanding of what exactly are we doing? Why are we trying to go there? You want to stimulate togetherness and collaboration. But because business is governed by a set of rules, it's really, really important that you agree on the rules. So define the rules from the get-go. Don't create rules on the way as you feel. It will be very quite unfortunate for anyone to have to go through having to have new rules on the way of their work. So imagine, for example, you've defined for me an objective for a month, right? And just right on the way, 2 weeks to go, you change this objective. And maybe even in many cases, maybe you change in a manner that just doesn't even seem reasonable, didn't even consult with the person which you want them to deliver on these objectives. It generates negative emotion, and that starts to lead to breakage of trust. So it's important to really, really define on the rules. I've highlighted some things that I think good rules have. Good rules have measurable outcomes. Everyone in the rule, and rules that I'm referring to here could be in form of an employment engagement, could be in form of a customer contract, could be in form of a partnership contract. But good rules have measurable outcomes. You can tell precisely, without ambiguity, at what point would we say success has been arrived at. Rules have defined rewards and consequences. Very good rules as well has very clear, oh, this is the reward that is the right waiting for me. And please bear in mind, it's important people are able to see themselves, even in the things that you want them to trust and commit to. So good rules have very clear, definitive rewards for the organization, if in the case of the business, and also for the person. And it also has very clear consequences, also for both parties. Good rules as well also think about exception handling. None of us, for example, plan for a moment where we'll all be stuck at home over a couple of weeks. So by design, there should be some mechanism put in place in every good rule to undo any exception that we don't envisage. It could be as simple as, if for any reason we see that these things aren't going the way we want, or maybe the assumptions we have did not eventually pan out. Oh, we're going to have a meeting, or we're going to have a gathering, or we're going to have an exchange of conversation, of communication. Good rules oftentimes think about how exceptions will be handled. Another good rules primarily establish the governance for a relationship. I think trust between a person or between something in itself oftentimes comes right or gets broken because of what you can think about as failed promises or failed expectations. What you're thinking isn't what I'm thinking. What we agreed isn't what we agreed. What we're doing isn't what we said we would do. So a good rule will primarily create governance for a relationship, and we should take our time to ensure we put in an effort in writing things down. One of the first rules I wrote on business is what you write down, not what you say, feel, or think. You literally need to establish what are the clear rules that will guide this relationship with my people, this relationship with my customers. I think the next slide, number 4, really is give trust at how. I did start with why. Communicate clearly why something is being done, or why something needs to be believed in, or why we need to go somewhere. Communicate what? What exactly are we going to do to achieve this why? And what is my role in it as a person, or as a customer, or as a partner? Establish the rules that make it binding. So define, even though we've communicated our why, we know what we need to do. Let's define the rules that now means we can be accountable to each other. But there's an important place that is next, right after what, which is how. It's right after rules, which is how. How it's when a person oftentimes likes to rely on their own mental and creative ability. How is a good place to establish trust and a bad place to break it quickly. Oftentimes, when it's time to do something, everyone wants their ingenuity, wants the knowledge they've acquired, the expertise they have, the experience they've gathered over years to come to light or to come to display in a bid to do something in a particular way. I think as a leader, it's really, really, really important that we define clearly why and what, and we give people, and we give our people the responsibility or the opportunity or the autonomy to figure out their hows. Now, it's not in all cases. There are cases where even the role we're playing, if it's in case of a customer, is in helping them figure out how to get something done. And there are also cases where, because the thing is really, really just new, we're also even really just learning by doing. So we want to be involved in how. But in cases where we're clear on what we need to achieve, we're clear on why we need to achieve them, we define the rules around them. It's really, really important we allow for the autonomy of how to go with the people we're doing it with. Because it means that each party can now play their role. And don't forget that a good rule will have captured what are the responsibilities of both parties. I personally have a personal rule, which is I don't go into something if I'm unwilling to trust or nurture. And I'm saying this in relation to how. So you might find yourself in scenarios where you have to work with people who are also just building their capabilities in being able to do something properly, which is the how. And there's a decision I often like to make within my mind. Like, it's either I trust completely the person's capability, just so I can allow them the autonomy based on our why, what, and the rules we've defined, or I am willing to apply myself to nurturing them in the process of growing. And it's trust we're speaking about. So you want to give trust so you can also earn it. And whatever it is you're attempting to establish and earn as a person or as a business, it's also important to figure out the mechanisms for giving it. Please bear in mind, giving trust in itself is a stage in the process. We could decide that, it's not a how we want to give it, but I think it's an element towards being able to establish trust within the company. If you look at the image as well, behind trust is a couple of things. It's honesty, it's people, it's respect, it's relationships, acceptance, it's belief. All of those things are elements of things you must demonstrate when you are at the process of your how, as the case is. Number 5 really is lead. I want to make sure we end this at 1:40, just so we can take the last 20 minutes to really just have a conversation. I would also like to hear your own perspective as well around this whole idea of trust. So number 5 really is lead. You've defined why, you've specified what, you've aligned on what, you've agreed on the rules of engagement, and you've established a mechanism of how, which is led oftentimes by the other party you're attempting to earn trust from, or you're attempting to build trust with. It is very, very important that you understand that between a start and an expected end is a journey. And that journey requires one important thing, which is leadership. It is very important to be clear in your mind what type of leadership is needed at every stage. So we may need a different type of leadership at the beginning. As we evolve as a company, how do I also need to evolve my leadership approach? And how do I also need to determine at what different times do I move from being leading from behind, or being in front of the pack, or just being right side beside them? And I think we need to think these things through. As much as we think about the problem we want to solve, the customers we want to acquire, the companies we want to build, the scale we want to achieve. It's very, very important as well to think about leadership and to think about during different stages of our business. Some stages we will never be prepared for. And one important quote often really spoken about is, in times of crisis and chaos, lead from the front. In times of success and progress, lead from behind. But there are times as well where you need to lead right beside them, where you need to kind of like go in together. So I think it's really important to own this attribute and to consciously take this into consideration as we attempt to build our companies to be filled with trust and to embody trust in growing our businesses. Number 6 really is what I would say it's the icing on the cake for number 1 to 5. Do what you say you will do. You are what you do, not what you say you will do. So while you may have defined why you may have aligned on what, while you may have also set defined rules around how are we going to manage our relationship as an employee in the organization, as our customer, or as my partner, it is really, really important that you do what you say you will do in those rules, because that's really where you can really, really solidify trust that you're earning. Remember, we spoke about this at the beginning, that trust in itself is a journey. And this journey itself doesn't start and end on day one. It's continuous. And number 6 could be, it was at your 3rd or 4th month. It could be, it was at your 1 year, as the case is. But really, really ensuring that whatever you've captured in the rules of engagement, you do them. And number 7 is really not much different, which is just keep repeating number 1 to 6. Bearing in mind, trust in itself is an attribute that is earned, and it could be lost or maintained. Because something has been earned doesn't mean that it can be lost, or doesn't mean you don't need to maintain it. So you have to embody 1 to 6 in literally everything people see you do. And because most people will believe what you do more than what you say, consistently bearing in mind that almost every single customer, how do we take them on this journey of becoming their trusted advisor? Almost every single employee, how do we take them on this journey of becoming a transparent and trustworthy company? And also a company who primarily keeps his word. And his word sometimes could even be applying consequences. So it's really, really important that we go over this cycle 1 to 7 and 1 to 6 rather, and consistently repeat them in all the different opportunities we'll have across building our business. I'll stop here. I think it's already 1:40, and just kind of like maybe focus to take the questions. Or I don't know if Dr. Stephen wants to make any comments, or if I can continue with questions.
Thank you so much, Yomi. Please, can we just applaud Mr. Yomi Adedeji for this amazing time? Just raise your hand and just acknowledge what he's done. He has done really amazingly well. Yomi, thank you so much. This is really remarkable. In fact, you blew my mind, and I learned a lot from the things that you shared. I want to allow you to continue as flexible as you would like to. I don't know if you can see the 2 questions already showing that if you'd like to engage the questions, and if you want to hear anyone directly, you could ask that they raise their hand so that I can allow them to talk, so you can listen to them. Whichever suits.
I think either way is fine.
Okay.
I don't know if there are any more questions that anyone wants to write. If anyone wants to speak about it, I think it's also fine. Yeah.
Okay, so for our participants, I would like you to make your questions available at the Q&A section. You'll find a button there at the base, Q&A. Just click on that and indicate your question there so Yomi can see and respond. And if there's something you would like to make clear, you can just raise your hand. I'm going to lower everyone's hand now. So any hand I see raised up, possibly you want to make a question clear, maybe you'd like to express yourself. Okay, so Yomi, I think we can start with the questions that we have already there now.
All right, thank you, Doctor. Would you advise to rather focus trust and commitment to someone that is the leader or something? Would you advise, because I think it's the same person, I'm just going to read the second one as well again. Would you advise to rather focus trust and commitment to someone or something? Where should young Yomi building Softcom in final year Covenant University focus on? Okay. I'll take the first part of the question. I think really it's important, or in my view, I think it's really important to focus trust on something. What I mean by that is, I think it's in the process of attempting to even build an interest as a person. I think an element of it is to understand humanity itself, which is human beings could be subject to anything, could be subject to any type of influence that means that they require some room. There's some room for benefit of doubt, or some room itself to be human. When we set our minds on something, and something oftentimes is really why, purpose, like something exactly that we're attempting to achieve, I think it helps, it really, really strengthens our mind. However, if you work in an organization, it's almost impossible to separate someone that is leading us from the something that the organization is trying to do. So I see both of it together. And I think um, in attempting to think about trust and commitment, we should bear in mind that it's also a journey. I think it's important to be dynamic in one's mind and to be open-minded. And the process of being open-minded, understand that we will either end trust where we've come to work, or in who we're doing business with, or not. But it's when we already have a premeditated mind, it's really difficult to even see the opportunity for building trust. So I think that is something I would say in relation to the first question. What does trust need to look like? What does trust need to look like when as a leader, you're still trying to figure out things out with the business you run? And I think this is really an experience I went through myself. And which is why I said itself, trust is a journey. And oftentimes, especially as entrepreneurs, you make the commitments, you want to achieve certain things. And for some reason, as an example, you're unable to achieve those things. And because of that, you're unable to keep your commitment. Lessons forward in life about these times and these experiences is what is best is you communicate clearly. If you would, for any reason, break your commitment, oftentimes the indication of it happening comes a little bit ahead of it. People appreciate sitting down with them, talking to them, letting them know the rules we defined, how big, what those rules were supposed to achieve for us, and how much commitment I have shown to it, right? We are unable to achieve these things we've defined in these rules, right? How do we kind of like make amends? And I think that in itself is part of the process of trust building. And I think is part of conflict. There will be times where there might even be conflict within people or within two organizations. But just making a conscious effort to provide clarity, to sit down, to communicate intent, and to consistently also communicate why you're unable to meet those obligations. And I really want to focus on the emphasis on why. And sometimes the why might not even be good enough. But to also ensure as we go along the line, we're learning from all of our experiences and we're using it to shape the trust we want to build into our business in the future. From past organizations, I see that small, medium-sized organizations are more entrepreneurial in their operations. As the numbers scale up, most organizations become more rigid. How do you at Softcom, while scaling up, ensure that you remain entrepreneurial? This is a very, very interesting question. Thank you, Debo, because something I really, really think about. As you grow, when you start a business, oftentimes you're focused on why, what, and for who. So all of your effort in validating if your business itself will exist over the next couple of weeks, and sometimes even just a month or even a year, depending on how much raw capital you have, is oftentimes geared towards why we're here, what we need to do, and what we need to do it for. And it's naturally aligned because everyone is pointed at something. Now, as the organization starts to grow, you start to realize the need to introduce processes and structures. The reason for process and structure is to create a mechanism for alignment. Because when you have 5 people, you can sit around the table and say, oh, guys, we're going to get this done. And in the morning, we see ourselves. In fact, if we need to ask ourselves a question, I'm just literally just the next table to you. But as the organization expands, the opportunity for human interaction, the opportunity to not misunderstand each other, the opportunity to be aligned in things starts to decline. And at that point in time, I think an entrepreneur must think about what is going to be the mechanism for consistently ensuring the organization is aligned. An example of something we do at Softcom really is we have a desire to keep ourselves always small. So even if we become 500 people or 1,000 people, as a company, we have a desire and a culture to just always keep our thinking and our things small. So we just have smaller groups of purpose. So you may find 200 people, but you see that they belong to smaller groups of purpose. So 24 of them are primarily focused on something, or 25 of them. And even though they will still work within their various departments, we have a structure we call the hybrid matrix structure that primarily allows us to combine what you know today as departmental structures. So I'm working in engineering, I'm working in customer service, with what you can think about as a purpose structure. So even though I'm working in engineering, I'm primarily working towards ensuring, for example, people can bank. Or I'm primarily working towards ensuring our customers can get access to our services. It's really, really important to continue to ensure we create a mechanism for why. I think that's one of the ways to keep the organization small, fast. People need to always be connected to why they are doing things. Agreeing on the rules, sir, does that mean the rules will always be in favor of the relationship or business? I think the idea of rules establishes that there are two parties. And I think in agreeing on the rules, I'm speaking to a party now. There will always be another party. And the other party could be, and I'm speaking to Victor. So Victor is a party now. The other party could be Victor's colleague. The other party could be Victor's business partner or be Victor's customer. So in ensuring we are able to end trust with this other party, right? Or we're able to establish a trust or create a room to allow us to easily integrate our differences. It's really, really important that the rules are well defined. At no point in time do we subject ourselves to unfavorable rules. There's a part of us that should know that there's honor in commitment. So when we sign a document, right, there's honor in committing and in abiding to it. So it's really important that before that document is signed, we ensure that everything that we think would be an issue for us, we want them to take into consideration, we want to be captured, we think we want to debate, we do so at the beginning. And we don't do so towards the end, as the case is. What advice do you have for someone who is working in an environment that belittles employees and doesn't foster trust? I am in the beginning of my career and I feel like leaving there, but I've been told to wait and learn or get a better job. What would you advise me to do? Well, I don't think anyone should subject themselves to being belittled. And I don't think that anyone as well should subject themselves to an environment that doesn't give them trust. I don't want to say foster trust because fostering trust in itself is very broad. It doesn't give them trust. And giving trust really is some of the first steps to really knowing if trust can be fostered in this environment. And giving trust starts with the environment communicating clearly to us what our responsibilities are. And us as individuals, knowing that it is now our responsibility to meet that environment in the middle, to ensure we're also fulfilling our commitment. So if we're not fulfilling our commitment, then there are deeper underlying issues. So, and these underlying issues, for example, might not even be what we interpret as, oh, we're not fostering trust or we're being belittled. But I think everyone should work in a place where they feel respected, they feel wanted, and they feel that they can add value to whatever is going on in that place. And if at any point in time, there's a loss in feeling, I don't think the first thing to do is think about just quitting. I think it's think about evaluating. It's think about speaking to people. It's also think about seeking clarity. Because in my experience, I've seen how sometimes people have had very negative imaginations when it's just as simple as just a question and an answer is given in that regard. The network person says, can you speak more to what you said earlier concerning leading from the front when there's a chaos, leading from the back when there's success, and leading from the side? Okay, I'm just going to go back to the slide itself. I think it's all right. I think that leadership in itself is something that I think every single entrepreneur or anyone who is a manager should make a conscious effort to read about. When we've communicated to people what they need to achieve, and we've clearly told them why they need to achieve it, and we believe that they have the competence to get it done, to figure out the how, or we are willing to extend ourselves. So when we believe that they have the confidence to get it done, we have to lead from behind. I want to kind of like simplify that. When we're clear that our group is clear on what they need to do, we've communicated those things, the capabilities to get those things are done is there. Or even the desire to learn about how to get it done is also there. Because sometimes it's not just the capabilities, it's also the desire, it's also the interest. Because problems we face sometimes vary. And we may not even have all the experiences we need to tackle every single problem. I personally prefer leading from behind in that scenario. When there is a problem, when, for example, goals are not being met, quarterly results are not being met, or there's an issue, or there is some sort of chaos like we have in today's world, or any form of uncertainty, I personally prefer to lead in the front. When we're trying to learn new things, when we're trying to understand new things, when we're trying to answer new questions, I like to lead from the side. The reason I like to lead from the side when we're trying to understand new things or learn new things or answer new questions is my shadow in front almost means I'm now a reflection of what the right answers are. And leadership is also about posturing. And knowing where to stand at different times is also a very important thing to learn around leadership. So once I stand in front, when we're trying to learn or when we're trying to figure things out, then I become the reflection through which answers are made. In that time, I like to stand by the side. I don't know if that speaks to it a little bit more. For the person who asked me about this question, it was an anonymous question. So I've always had a problem with trust, and that's why I'm discouraged to start a big business. How do you know the right people to trust in building a company in order to prevent crisis? This is really, really interesting and quite a dilemma I also did go through. I thought about things in a particular set of ways. I wanted to do things in a particular set of ways. And increasingly, I was struggling with conflict with just being able to kind of like get these things out of my head and get them done. And there was a lot of discouragement as well on the way. And I would say to a large extent, also dwindled my own desire to attempt to go build a company, a massive company, as you described in your question. Fearing what exactly, how will this go? How am I going to, without this, how am I going to get past all of these stages? But let me kind of like say to you first that the problem you're going through now, if it's in the early stages, is normal. I want to say to you, it's so normal, especially in the environment that we're in. But it can't discourage you. And really, there's no formula to think about in how do you kind of like determine who is going to be right. Because someone that is right today could be wrong tomorrow. Someone that you trust today could, for any reason, sometime in the future, change. What I think is really important in business is to follow governance, to make a conscious effort to remove oneself from the idea of one's business, and to ensure that even the person that could be a problem could even be us ourselves, and to define a set of rules that govern the relationship between people. And these rules could even include, if for any reason we're attempting to build a big company and XYZ happens, this is what we're going to do. Exhausting those rules is what I think oftentimes startup entrepreneurs fail to do. When I started as well, I was too enthusiastic, excited, driven, and passionate about what we're trying to do, that every single black and white we needed to sign to ensure people don't have misunderstandings, to ensure people don't have different opinions about things. We're not put in place as they were meant to be. Over time, we've improved, and we're generally improving. But this is not a problem to fear. And I think some ways to tackle them is to really just define the rules around things. How do you demonstrate trust in a crisis situation, Onyx? I think it begins with just being clear. I think I want to take you on that journey again. it really, really begins with just being clear on what you see. What do you see in this crisis situation? And to be honest with yourself, in an example of like COVID, do you see revenue dwindlings? Do you see an inability to meet cost obligations? Do you see an inability to meet customer obligations? Once you're clear on what you see, the next thing you want to do is be clear on how you want to communicate it and why you want to communicate it that way. So in attempting to build trust in a crisis situation, I would say communicate proactively. Don't communicate reactively. Don't wait for people to imagine that, for example, they'll be fired. If they'll be fired, sit them down, talk to them, let them know what are the specifics that has gone on, why you have to take this decision, and give them honor and respect very quickly. So I think going through this journey and attempting to properly communicate to people will be something to use to address demonstrating trust in a crisis situation. Hi, Yomi, how do you deal with a situation whereby your team member who you trusted earlier has lost your trust? Would you let go of the person or what? This is quite an interesting question. I think that I want to go back again to the rules. And I'm going to just go back to the slide again, just to really reemphasize that there are attributes of good rules, right? And these good rules often has defined rewards and consequences. And in talking about trust, please let us separate trust in an activity from trust in itself in feelings. Because sometimes it may not even be that we've lost trust. We just lost the feeling of trust. And the feeling of trust comes from connecting with people, comes from feeling like these people have your back, comes from a lot from success, actually. Because when people progress together, there's just a general sense of things are good, things are great. But we must also plan for those moments when things are not. So if there's someone who you've lost trust with, it's really, really important you diagnose what are the real reasons why you lost trust in them. And to not leave the reasons at the first level. This conversation is not focused on meaning, but I want to just highlight something because of the question that was asked. I think there are 3 stages of meaning. The first stage is very obvious, what you can call the explicit meaning. The implicit meaning oftentimes, which is like, what is the other meaning behind this explicit meaning? But right below that implicit meaning is where real meaning exists. And so I think it's really important we always come to terms with what are the foundational things that went wrong? Why am I in this situation? And to determine what is the right course of action based on the rules and based on the information that we have access to. I'm going to rush a few over the next few questions. I'm here to answer for as much time. I think I'm free to 3. For as much time, or 2:30, I'm free to 2:30. For as much time that we need to talk through this. So Dr. Stephen, please let me know. I'm just taking the questions one by one and attempting to speak to them.
All right.
So how do you deal with a situation whereby your team member, I think I've answered that question. I understand how long it takes to build trust in any form of relationship. In this case, for business, when certain circumstances beyond the control occurs that are unable to do the things you have promised, how can one rebuild the trust to these customers, especially with competition everywhere today? Thank you. I think this is a really, really important question. I believe that to win a customer is harder than to keep a customer. And when a relationship was broken, whether it was because of a non-fulfillment of a promise you had, and especially when it's really for genuine reasons that maybe, for example, you had planning issues and the things you put in the plan wasn't what you envisaged. It could be you had product issues. It could be you have any type of issues. I think to rebuild trust with them, you have to just ask for a sit down. An element of trust in itself is honesty. And sometimes it's as simple as just being honest about some of the situations that you went through that made it impossible for you to keep the promise that you are meant to keep. My preference would be to proactively communicate this, to not get to trust is broken before you let them know I won't be able to meet those goals. I won't be able to achieve those things. I won't be able to pay that money. I won't be able to do these things in whatever it is we've defined that we must do. But if for any reason you find yourself now responding, I think it's important to sit down with the customer and go through why trust was broken. Align on what success meant for them, because oftentimes we have our own opinions. We're even unwilling to see what success means to the other person. The way you give trust back to this customer, for example, will be commit to delivering an outcome. Maybe, for example, without any commitment. Commit to solving a new challenge for them that may not even take too much from you, in a bit to establish that you're interested in their progress. I have a rule that every single customer must take us from customer. The height of the pyramid itself is called the trusted advisor for me. There are about 4 stages of customer acquisition. So once you become the customer itself, I think it's the first step. Because of time, I'm only going to speak to the last stage, the stage where I become the trusted advisor to the customer. And when I'm saying as a trusted advisor, either as a company or as a product or as a representative of the company. And I think in doing so, it is really, really about getting the customer to connect with you, that you have their interest at heart. So beyond the product you need to build, the things you need to sell, in communicating those things, even though those things might be what is important to you, what must be very visible is how value will be created for the customers you're doing it for. And if you've lost trust, you go back there, you speak, and you attempt to give trust by offering help, as the case will be. In terms of doing what we say we would do, there are also sometimes situations does not allow one to do what one had planned to do. At such instance, how does one make? I think I've just answered a similar question as well. What should one do when one's leader doesn't listen or could be quite petty, and you feel you can add more to the organization? I think this in itself is more of a personal issue between you and the person. And I don't know if it speaks to our core on trust and commitment. But I think in any situation we find unpleasant, I think a general rule in life is when you find a situation unpleasant, you find a situation inadequate, or you feel that you can do more in a situation, an important thing to do is to speak out. I think a good contributor, a good person, a good partner will always speak out and say to you, oh, these things, I don't think it should be this way. So if you do say that we have a leader that doesn't listen and is quite petty, I think it's really, really important that we communicate clearly. But also we have a high level of emotional intelligence in doing so. I don't think it's a pleasant thing to say to our manager or our leader in this context, oh, you're petty or you're not listening. But I think it's good to attempt to communicate very clearly. If you can't do so verbally, maybe, for example, they're unable to listen to you, to document it in an email, to share them. We must always make a conscious effort to attempt to solve a problem if we find ourselves, I guess, in this situation. How do you lead a group of people when the values of the organization differ from you with your own personal value? I think everyone should work in an organization whose values align with theirs. And if they find themselves in an organization for any reason that have varying values, it's either you try to bring light to it if you believe your values are more solid. But please bear in mind that a business primarily is established to drive a purpose and to accomplish an objective and deliver profits to its shareholders. Every other thing is structured under that statement. But I don't think anyone should subject themselves to a question of their values. And sometimes a good thing to do as well is to leave, as the case is. How can a business leader keep a team committed to the goals of the organization for the long term? Thank you. I think it's a very important question. How do you keep yourself committed to your goals for the long term? I've found the idea of OKRs to be very effective. If it's not something you have come across or you already use or already applying, please look into it. It's called objectives and key results. While entrepreneurs think about the long term, they must also bear in mind that even Jesus Christ, in a bid to help us believe that an heaven truly exists and salvation is meaningful, he had to give us evidences. He had to perform miracles. He had to kind of like do certain things to kind of like let us truly see that it is possible that there's some glory somewhere. So I think also that's how I think about business. Even though we think about long-term goals, it's really, really important we break down these long-term goals to short goals. Short goals because failure and short goals are opportunities to learn. Success is a catalyst. And these short goals help people keep a mind share of, oh, in 3 months' time, this is exactly what I need to achieve. In 6 months' time, this is exactly what I need to achieve. I also believe that it's important that a leader creates a mechanism for consistently sharing why. Why are we working on these things? Because if you want long-term commitments, people have to connect to your why. It can't be because you pay them well. It can't be because you're a better organization. After a while, some of those things will come to a place of meaning as they grow in their career. So I think it's really important to really, really, really speak to why and set very short and mid goals that help them track their progress as you go forward. How exactly does one lead a group whereby the organization values differs and gaining their trust seems difficult? I think I've attempted to answer that question as well. There are times you see someone as very loyal and you build a high degree of trust in person. What happens when the person you trust is weak? Olorun Poto Rahman. It seems like even a very familiar name. Someone I went to school with. There are times you see someone as very loyal and you build a high degree of trust in the person. What happens when the person trusts? Oh, okay. Hi, Aman, please. I'm going to email you after this. What happens when the person you trust is weak? I think that this is a bit of I would say it's a bit of a stretch because loyalty in itself and a high degree of trust oftentimes are defined ambiguously. It's really, really important to nail the idea of this trust in someone or trust in something. What is it? Hence why I did speak in the process. I don't know if everybody was on the call when we went through the slides, the 7 steps. That is very, very important that we clearly communicate why we want someone to trust us. So in this case, maybe it's a person communicating to us. It's also important that we know clearly what we are being trusted on. Because you can't say, oh, I'm going to trust you to be by my side in the morning and be right beside me at night. That isn't corporate work. That's more personal. When it comes to business, when it comes to corporate work, there has to be clear definitions on what does the business represent? What does the business want from me? What does the business need me to give them? And how do we build a journey of trust in that regard? I'll go to the next question. Thank you for sharing your insight. How do you communicate that you have been priced unfairly prior to joining an organization? You realize that the job is larger than you examined before agreeing to a remuneration.
That's my question, Yomi. My name is Muyo Aludayo. I asked that question.
Hi, doctor. It's nice to connect with you again.
Thank you. That was me who asked that question.
Let me attempt to. Do you want to give me some context?
Okay, so because I'm into recruitment and I help to hire for clients, right? So you find out that when you've done a role profile and a job description, which is supposed to represent the value that the employee is going to bring into the organization, you now realize that you have valued it and you have put a remuneration to it. But somehow, in the course of work, maybe not even so far into work, the whole thing changes, and the remuneration does not commiserate with the value, and the employee feels shortchanged. How does the owner of the business, the team lead, or the recruiter help in managing this situation? That's just what I'm trying to say.
All right, thank you, doctor, for the additional insights. I think that value in itself, I believe in it continues to evolve. And at the point of joining the organization, there was what value the person must have represented to the organization. And no matter what you define value for yourself, oftentimes the person paying for value also puts a price on it. By agreeing to that price or by agreeing to whatever that means as well at that stage, you've defined that as your value. But there's nothing wrong in a couple of weeks later, eventually understanding that the demand that this organization places on me or the results this organization wants me to achieve requires more than what I've committed to prior. And I don't know if we all have seen the Michael Jordan movie about Scottie Piper, some basketballer who committed to a long tenure with Chicago Bulls. And because the organization was unwilling to increase his remuneration, he had to leave. But there's an important bit to that story. Scottie Piper wasn't just a regular basketballer. He was the second best basketballer in the NBA. So this wasn't just a case of just someone who probably the organization could easily let go. It was the art of Chicago Bulls. He primarily drove the team and led to some of their initial successes. And in fact was Michael Jordan's big pusher, as the case is. But the organization held its stand. So I would say that while it's possible to have been undercut, maybe in the process of being recruited, as an employee, or as a person working in an organization, I would suggest that once you are able to clearly understand the value you need to create, and you have shown evidence, please bear this in mind, an organization and a person are both taking risk on themselves. You can sit down and use the evidence that you've created to have a conversation about the agreement or the engagement which you go into. I personally don't think that the method to go into that conversation as the employee in this case is to say, oh, I was told I'm going to, this is more. It's to kind of like really, really say that if there's this role that you defined for me, and I'm realizing that it's taking more from me to deliver on this output, here is an evidence of this output, but I think we need to rethink this. I will also say it on the angle of, it could also be a case where you have not necessarily been put in even where you were employed to work. So it could be that maybe you're employed to do A, you now have 7 other responsibilities. I also think in that scenario, you can take that information as well to sit down with the employer to say, hey, I was asked and employed formally to do one thing, but here are 7 other things I'm doing. I think we need to talk about this. But I would say in the 2 scenarios, do so with evidence. It could be evidence of the work you've done to prove yourself in 1 month, evidence of the work you've done to prove yourself in 3 months. But don't approach this conversation from an entitlement point of view, which primarily says, I am this, I have a bunch of these skills, you've asked me to do all of these things, I need to be paid more. Because an entrepreneur typically would think about value. So it's a different thing if you come to say, I was employed to do a bunch of these things, I've been doing all of these things, here's the outcomes I'm achieving for the business. I think it's important that we talk about what our remuneration is. I'll also speak on the side of the employer. Right? On the side of the employer, and we may find ourselves as well in this dilemma. I think this is a dilemma I've actually also been in before as a person. I think we have to define who we are as an organization. And in the time that this happened, what had happened was we're not formalized what we call our pay structures, right? People primarily had scenarios where someone could get paid more than another person, primarily because of their mode of entry or the conversation or the responsibility they had. But in standardizing our pay structure, what we did was we've now created rules governing how people pay. So even an HR person can't just say, I like this person better than I like this person, let me pay them more. So I would say the eventual solution to the problem from an organizational point of view is to really just define the structures of reward and use that structure of reward to drive how you engage people, how you bring people into the organization. If for any reason, however, you've defined that and you still find yourself in this situation, I think an organization must take a stand. Please remember one thing, what you do is more important than what you say. So if you have put in down a set of rules to govern even dealing with issues like this, follow those rules. If this situation becomes a new experience for you, have a sit down. I think every employer must be willing to have value conversations with the people they work with. And it could even be a month after, it could be 3 months after. There's no time to, you just joined the organization last month, how come you're trying to talk to us now? I think every employer should always discuss value with their people. If a recruiter is involved in this case, I've never really experienced this in relation to a recruiter before, but I think the role of recruiter will be to attempt to be the bridge between the employer and the employer. But this is also a function of what relationship the company has with the recruiter. It could be recruit for me. It could be recruit for me and support me. I think those rules we've defined between what exists between the employer and the recruiter will also influence the role and the extent to which the recruiter can play a role in solving this problem. Doctor, that's all I can share.
No, you give a professorial response. It was fantastic and very experiential. Thank you very
much. Thank you, guys. I think I've covered all of the questions.
Thank you so much, Yomi. Please, can we just applaud Yomi one more time for that amazing session and the question and answer session by just raising your hands. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. So, Yomi, I have one more question before we allow you to go. We both finished from Covenant, and of course, you know the whole idea and environment around it, and the hopes and opportunities that students can have to start something, just like you had the chance of starting Softcom right on campus in Covenant University. So for two students who would like to come together to start something really interesting, a company that wants to solve a big problem, maybe two or more, and what are the things that they should be thinking about around trust? What should they sign? What kind of agreements should they make? What should they be thinking about just to ensure that 1 year ahead, 2 years ahead, there shouldn't be anything that will lead to conflict? I don't know if you understand my question clearly.
Yes, I do. I think that I'm yet to, I mean, there are scenarios where we hear this, but what is often common is when people are attempting to go into a relationship, they do so with a good mindset. They have great expectations, good aspirations, and oftentimes very connected together to achieving something together. And that in itself stimulates good energy, good conversations, and they literally fall in love with themselves in an attempt to, oh, let's go try to solve this problem together. But one thing that is really, really important is to separate self from business. If there's any lesson I will share with anyone who wants to start a business today, is to have the hard conversations at the beginning. As an example, a business will need to have a leader. A business wouldn't want to go to two directions. So you kind of like want to place accountability on someone who will be responsible for leading the business forward. I think it's very, very important that the conversation around who is going to lead us forward, who is going to be the CEO, who is not going to be the CEO, are we going to co-do this? And do we understand the difference between we're partners and we have our day's job? I think it's really, really important to determine who is going to lead the effort. I think another thing to really think about is what is going to happen if all this doesn't go well. And I know at the beginning of a venture, you don't think about not going well. You think about, oh, we're going to cover these miles. We're going to climb these mountains. We're going to go to these countries and do these things. But when reality sets in, human resilience and full interest comes to test. Adversity will come, I want to guarantee you. And it doesn't take long. Adversity will come. And at the point of adversity, you want to rely on something you define as your governance. You don't want to be arguing at that time. You don't want to say, oh, I was the one that did this. I did more than you. You did more than me. It's my business. It's not my business. And I'm not saying this because you should aim for failure. But a good plan, is foolproof, right? And you typically should ensure you ask yourself, if things don't go well with us, how do we separate things? What's going to happen? Oh, I might say, you know what, this is the life I want to live, right? You might say, oh, you know what, if this doesn't go well after 2-3 years, I'm going to do this. In relation to my shares, okay, maybe I can keep half and you can keep the remaining because I'm going to leave you there. I think it's really, really important to have those conversations at the beginning. I think another thing to really, really talk about is what are the things that are important to you as a person? I feel that over the long time, two people can't do business together at the depth of partnership if they don't have things that are important to them that are similar. So, for example, is it important to us that we're able to feed the needy? Is it important to us for me as I'm trying to grow this business, to be able to, for example, give people scholarship? Is it important to me to be able to go build an office? The other person might not have those views. They might think, well, I think about business in this way. And these differences aren't bad. Sometimes the best partners are those who are completely different, as the case is. It's just to talk about them and to ensure they are all integrated. You don't assume. There's an article I can share with you, Doctor, that kind of like articulates when starting a business, the 7-8 things you need to make sure you get done. I think every entrepreneur should research about how will I get my business partnership to work? And if it doesn't work, how will I resolve it? In as much as they research about the product they want to build, the industry they want to work, the customer they want to serve, it's really, really important that the foundation that the company will sit on is put in a legal document that can govern people's feelings, that can govern people didn't wake up well in the morning. Somebody feels like something has gone wrong or something is not going well. And it's best to do it at the beginning, because at the beginning it's all love. So there's actually no value. There's oftentimes nothing yet. So you can have these conversations at ease before any conflict arises. I also think I've spoken about dealing with conflicts and issues. I also think in attempts to deal with success, really, really also think about how do we go forward. But don't overthink this, because oftentimes if your business will succeed or not, it's in itself a first couple of years journey that you really need to really figure out. And while you may have the desires to have your headquarters in Cape Town or San Francisco or everywhere in the world, those things won't matter if you don't get past this defined stage. I always use this popular process called design thinking. It articulates how you go from idea to taking a product to market. I think it helps. And I think each of the partners should talk to themselves about each of these stages and what it means to them. I think those are the things I can share with anyone attempting to start business today. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you so much, I really appreciate it. I also look forward to the material you said you'd like to share.
All right, I'll send it right away.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. To our participants, thank you so much. Also,
Please send to me as well. Please send to me as well.
Oh, okay. Dr. Luda is requesting for it as well.
I will. Thank you, Doctor.
Can we just appreciate Yomi Adedeji one more time for that amazing session that he has granted us? Just Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Dr. Luda, thank you too for joining us. We are appreciative of your presence and your qualitative questions that helped to enrich us. And Yomi, thank you again. You've always been a blessing to us. Thank you for the impact you're making. Thank you for the value you're creating. Thank you for what you are doing in society. Thank you, Lord, for the grace you granted all of us to be part of this. So Yomi, God bless you richly indeed. And we hope that we'll have more and bigger things to do together, and also to see how we can improve these people who have joined us. And I hope for our participants, for the things you've learned, you'll be able to do a lot more with this. Thank you so much, everyone. If you have any question further, please feel free to always send to us via email, and I can communicate directly to Yomi. So the email you can use is contact@edustart.global, contact@edustart.global, or you can also use, I'll put it in the chat section now. You can also use learn@edustart.global. Let me just put this I'll share this here now so that we can all see that. So that's it, learn@edustart.global. Any further questions, you can just always share with us. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. God bless you richly, and I hope we'll have amazing times together. We're going to also have a session next week, particularly on the 11th of May 2020, and we're going to be having Ewini Odun Ewini, co-founder of Piggyvest, and she'll be sharing with us on women entrepreneurship and how that can also help advance our society. So have a great time. Thank you very much. God bless you, and we'll see you some other time.